Okay, so now let's go to today's objective, which is to use embedded functions. We saw it in the warm-up, but we're going to use it to solve word problems. And so it says, Otoniel needs to buy cookies for a party that he's throwing. He will buy 2 cookies per person that he invites to a party. He will invite 3 people per day until the party comes. If the party is in 20 days, how many cookies will he buy? So let's represent this with a function and this with a different one. So he will buy 2 cookies per person. So we can say that f of x is equals to 2 cookies per person. So notice how when I wrote the x, I said per person. So x represents the number of people invited. Okay? And the f of x, if these 2 cookies per person, so the total will be f of x, which it represents the total number of cookies. Okay? Now the next sentence says he invited 3 people per day. So that will be g of x is equals to 3x. So the number that he invites, it's 3 per day. So the x represents the number of days until the party comes. And he'll invite each day 3 people, so it's going to be that the g of x represents the total number of people invited. Okay, so it says that the party will be in 20 days. So in here, what does that represent? Where do I see days? 20 days. Well, x in this function, x represents the number of days, so that's where I'm going to replace my 20. Okay, and we can find that part first. If we want to know what the embedded function would be, it would look like this. F of g of, and instead of x, we know that it's 20 days, so it will be f of g of 20. Okay, maybe I should put this in here like this with green. But that's what it means, okay? Why 20 here? Because 20 represents the number of days until the day of the party. Okay, so I can represent it in here to represent the days. Okay, so first we're gonna solve for g of 20. So g of 20 is equals to, g of 20 is equals to 3 times 20. And that gives me 60. What does that 60 represent? G of x, g of 20 represents the total number of people invited. So this is the total number of people invited. Why does that make sense? Because it says 3 people per day, 3 people, and then there are 20 days, so 3 people each day of the 20 days is a total of 60 people, right? But then that just solves for g of 20 to give me the total number of people, but now I have to figure out how many cookies will Otoniel buy. So now I can replace this, right? Number of people invited, total number of people invited, into my f of, now I know f of x, I know that x, which is the number of people invited, is 60, will give me 2 times X, it represents here the number of people invited, and 2 times 60 is 120. Now what does that 120 represent? Well, there are two number of people invited is X, and the 2 represents the 2 cookies per person, so the 2 cookies multiplied by the 60 people invited gives me 120 cookies in total that Otoniel has to buy. Okay, take a minute to maybe pause it and take notes. Now let's go to a different one. It says, imagine that you're buying telephones for your company online. Each order costs $200 per telephone and $10 of shipping. You need to buy 2 telephones for every employee. What is the cost if you employ 6 people? Okay, so again, let's represent this with different functions. And so we have cost, it's $200 per telephone and 10 shipping. So we can say that f of x is equals to 200 per telephone, 200 per telephone, and $10 shipping. So what does the x representing here? Well, as you notice, when I said 200 per telephone, that means number of telephones. How many I'm gonna buy? Okay, and what does the f of x represent? Well, it refers to the 200 per telephone and the $10 shipping. That means the total cost. Okay, for the next one, it says you need to buy 2 telephones for every employee. So my g of x is 2 telephones for every employee. So what does the x represent? The number of employees that you will have. And f of x, g of x represents, well, 2 telephones per employee. That means that it's going to be the total number of telephones that you will buy. Okay, total number of telephones that you will buy. Now it's asking, what is the cost if you employ 6 people? So basically means find g of 6, right? Because x represents the number of employees. You employ 6 people, so that's your x. It's asking to replace this with 6. So the embedded, to figure out the total cost, right? It includes the cost, which is total cost, f of x. And then it gives you information of 6 people. So basically you're using both of the functions. So it's f of g of, and then they are giving us that x it's 6 employees, and that will give me the cost. So again, you have to solve first the total number of telephones that you will get to figure out the total cost. Okay, figure out total number of telephones you will get for the 6 employees, to then figure out how much is the total cost. Okay, so g of 6 is equal to 2 times 6, which is equals to 2 times 6 is 12. Again, g of 6, g of x represents the total number of telephones, so that means that I'm going to obtain 12 telephones. Okay, now that I know how many telephones, I can replace f of, now that I have this, remember that this comes from finding this answer, so that I can replace it here and that's what I'm doing right now. The 12 goes instead of this. I only have the f of 12 now because this is f of 12. I mean 12. And so f of 12, I replace the 12 in here, so it's 200 per telephone times the 12 telephones that I'm gonna buy and $10 shipping. Now that $10 shipping is only one time, okay? So 200 times 12, that's $2,400 plus the $10 shipping. It's gonna give me a total cost of $2,410. Whoops, $10. And that's how much I'm gonna pay for the 12 telephones for the 6 employees. Okay, so I hope now with this information, with these examples, you can work on 7.9, and I hope you have fun.